Genetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Penna Dexter.
Thank you very much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen, for the Friday weekend edition of Point of View. Kelly Shackelford is in studio with me, and we are expecting Debbie Georgatos to join us also. And we have so much to talk about that I don't think I'm even going to preview the menu of today's show, because I'm not sure we'll get to it all. I think top of mind, though, Kelly, is one of the cases that I think our listeners are very familiar with that First Liberty Institute has been handling, has had a development in it that it was not unexpected, but it's very disturbing. And that's Coach Kennedy's case, the praying football coach. Tell us what's happened.
Well, the Ninth Circuit, which everybody knows is the most probably hostile court in the country to, basic values, considered the most liberal court in the country, has just denied what's called en banc, meaning they're going to let this three-person panel decision stand. And this is the decision that said that coaches are not allowed to pray in public as long as anyone can see them. And again,
it's crazy.
This goes back to Coach Joe Kennedy, a 15-second silent prayer by going to a knee after the football game by himself, that is now illegal, that is now prohibited, that you can fire people for that. That's the decision, and the Ninth Circuit did not take it up en banc, which means it's over at the Ninth Circuit, which means it's now set up, and we will be going to the United States Supreme Court. So this is something I encourage everybody to grab this, information. I'm sure I don't know if there's a link on pointofview.net yet, but you can go to firstliberty.org. But you can go to like the Facebook page at First Liberty or the Twitter account or whatever's easy for you to grab and share, because I think this is one of those things that the whole country needs to know about, and that really is a microcosm of the battle for the future of our country. I mean, if it's now illegal for, a coach after the game by himself to go to a knee and say a silent 15-second prayer, we've got real problems in this country. And this is at the highest level right below the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court is next, and I hope that they'll see, that this is something that has to be dealt with.
This is sort of a famous case. Even our president, Donald Trump, has mentioned it and calmed down.
Tweeted about it twice.
Has he?
Yes.
So in a sense, I mean, I don't know if that would affect whether the court takes this case or not, but Kelly, this is really disappointing. I think even the Ninth Circuit, I mean, I had a little hope that, for instance, en banc, they would take it, because the statements of the three-judge panel were so outrageous that I thought maybe there would be some need to correct that, but I guess not.
Yeah, I think people, would say, coaches, they're in front of kids and they influence the kids. But the problem here is the school district had admitted or conceded that he never coerced the kids in any way. It had nothing to do with that. And what he was fired for was going to a knee by himself for 15 seconds silently. And
this is after games.
That's right. And so that's what everybody thought, would be kind of would try to hang your hat on that. But that's not what they said. They didn't say, the kids. They said, no. A coach cannot pray in public if anyone, a spectator, somebody across the road, somebody down the street, whatever, if anybody can see, then, and that's why when I was on Fox being interviewed, I said, it's like prayer is the new pornography. Mm-hmm. You can't do this in public. If you pray in public and anybody can see you, you're in big trouble.
All right, Debbie Georgatos has joined us. Debbie's attorney and author and also host of her own radio show, America Can We Talk? And Debbie, what are your thoughts on this decision by the Ninth Circuit not to take it and to review the 3-judge panel?
I actually thought it was very surprising that the court en banc didn't want to at least give more consideration to the very points that Kelly was raising just a moment ago. And, because what part of the court decision was saying was the district said that this coach kneeling on the football field for a brief period of time was a potential signal of an establishment of religion by the public school that employed him. And so if any symbol or action that you may do that has religious connotation could be construed as an establishment of religion by the school. What about wearing a cross as a teacher? Mm-hmm. What about any kind of symbolism you choose that it's a personal expression? You don't require your class to wear, your students to wear a cross, but it both was shocking that they wouldn't take it and really a measure of the degree of hostility against religion in the federal courts in America, at least the Ninth Circuit.
Think of what this would mean. I mean, if the decision it stays, and that's now the law, which it certainly would be in the Ninth Circuit, that would mean that you can't do, again, what they said is, if you do anything religious that people can see, then it's a violation. Well, that would mean a teacher couldn't bow their head over their own meal. They couldn't wear a cross, as Debbie talked about. A Jewish teacher couldn't wear a yarmulke. We could just go down the list. Anybody who is religious can't be religious, even by themselves, even if they have no coercion or nothing on the students. Everybody is now who works for any government entity around the country can no longer ever do anything that anyone can see is religious, or they can be fired. So
this is part of this whole attempt by the left to confine religion and religious expression to your house of worship. You even have a case about praying in your home.
Right.
So you keep your religion at your church.
Yes.
That's what they like to see.
This is a really disturbing opinion. And so I encourage two things for people out there, because they wonder sometimes, they're like, I'm not a lawyer. What can I do about this? And, there's one thing you can do is put this on your prayer list, because this is now going to the Supreme Court. And this could be a great opportunity for something really good for the whole country. And the second thing I would say is share this information, because most people, if they don't listen to Point of View, they probably don't even know what's happening here. And I think, you need to share with your friends what's happening so they can be in prayer, so they can educate others. Because I think if the whole country rises up, President Trump, candidate Trump at the time, tweeted about this case twice and said this should not happen in the United States. That kind of really outrage across the country, I think, can make a big difference in how this turns out.
Okay, so you can go to firstlibertyinstitute.org.
Just firstliberty.org.
Firstliberty.org, or just go to pointofview.net. You can click through to First Liberty. And you can also go to pointofview.net, and we put an actual article about this decision out of the Seattle Times, since this took place out in Seattle, mm-hmm. Washington. So these are ways that you could inform people. You can also just get people to listen to this this particular version of our program today. We have a lot to talk about, I will admit. And I've got Kelly Shackelford and also Debbie Georgatos in studio with me. We're coming up on a break, but there's a lot more. I do want to mention that, one of the organizations that we talk about a lot here and criticize on Point of View is Planned Parenthood. Cecile Richards, the president, is someone that we've talked about a lot. She's actually announced she's stepping down from the helm there. I have no illusions that means that it's going to all of a sudden become a pro-life organization. But we are going to talk about that and so many more things. So stay with us for this Friday weekend edition here on Point of View. We'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
You've probably seen campaign yard signs popping up in your neighborhood. This is a vivid reminder that we're headed for another election season. The general election isn't until November, but party primary elections will be taking place in the next few months. What will be the agenda for the candidates for the political parties? Well, the Republican agenda should be fairly easy to predict. Incumbents will point to the recently passed tax reform bill and ask to be reelected to focus on unfinished business like health care reform and welfare reform. Other Republican candidates may argue that they should be put in office instead of career politicians so that we can drain the swamp. The agenda for Democrats isn't so easy to predict. They will point to wins in Virginia and Alabama. They'll say that Donald Trump is unpopular, but they really don't have an agenda that could make people want to vote for their candidates. Some have suggested that the current debate about DACA and Dreamers will be a possible item on the Democratic agenda. Matthew Continenti, in a recent column, explains why that won't be an effective strategy. A Pew poll that surveyed public priorities ranked immigration 15th. The top 3 items were terrorism, the economy, and education. It's also worth mentioning that the debate about the status of Dreamers will be resolved one way or another long before the November elections. Running against the president and the Republican leadership in Congress isn't a very compelling reason for potential voters to turn out in an off-year election. Matthew Continenti says that the Democratic policy cupboard is empty. There are no alternative Democratic health care bills, no alternative Democratic tax bill. This isn't the first time both Republican and Democratic candidates have tried to run an agenda of obstruction. I think voters are looking for more. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. Kelly Shackelford, Debbie Georgatos are in studio with me. I'm Penna Dexter, and we do like to recap the cases, the important cases that First Liberty is working on, and another one besides Coach Kennedy, which I think if folks want to weigh in on this, the fact that this case now is probably going to go to the U.S. Supreme Court, a case on a coach praying. I think it's amazing. And also we'll talk about another case that's had some developments. It has to do with Judge Mack and chaplaincy. So, Kelly, tell us about that one.
Judge Mack is exactly the type of person you want to be a public servant. I mean, he's just a great guy. He ran for office, and one of the reasons is he wanted to make things better. And he was a judge. He's a judge, and part of that in a small county, the duties for that is you're also the coroner. And so what he found out is when people were going to where people died and doing the official duties of the coroner, a lot of times there were families or others or people who were distraught, who were emotional, and he came up with the idea that we've got all these ministers in the community. I wonder if they would want to be a part of a volunteer chaplaincy program where they could be ministered to when these things happen, and the coroner could do their job being the coroner. And so that's what he did. And they had people of all faiths volunteer, and these ministers said, we would love to help people in this time who want help, who want ministry. And so it was a great idea. And so as he opened his court, he thought they were the natural ones to just on a rotating basis be the ones to open the court in prayer.
Sounds like a great idea.
Which we've done from the beginning of this country. I mean, Congress, we do that. I think everybody knows that. Well, the Freedom from Religion Foundation filed a lawsuit to strike this down. And, again, there's been two Supreme Court cases on this. One was Marsh v. Chambers, where the Supreme Court in the decision said, look, at the time the founders passed our Constitution, they had a paid chaplain. I mean, he not only opened for prayer, they were paying him out of the federal treasury. So for you to say that the founders thought this was unconstitutional just doesn't work. This goes back to the very, founding of our country. And then there was a recent case just a few years ago, a town of Greece, versus Galloway, which said, in which it was attacked, well, you can't have these ministers opening up the city council meetings in prayer. And the Supreme Court said, no, again, we've done this from the beginning. There's nothing wrong with this. It's constitutional. So it's a little surprising that now this lawsuit has been filed against Judge Mack and this great thing he's done and trying to stop the prayers before, the proceedings start. And unfortunately, we've got a federal judge who just ruled that, oh yeah, I'm gonna let this case continue when there's really no basis for it. And so
wasn't Judge Mack pulled out in a sense?
Yes.
So the case was really just against Montgomery County.
Yeah, we represented Judge Mack, and he is now out of the case. So we've got a victory for Judge Mack personally, but they're still continuing. The judge is allowing this to continue against the county. So now we're going to be doing everything we can to help the county because this decision is attacking something that really goes back to the founding of the country. And so we're going to be doing all we can to make sure that it's upheld, not only here, but really everywhere in the country.
So what will you have to do you think? Well,
I mean, if the judge is going to allow this to continue, then we're going to probably have to fight this over a number of years. I mean, this should have been dismissed, in our opinion. This is a baseless lawsuit. There's no ability for them to do anything to the county, but the judge, Judge Werlein is allowing this to go on. And so we're going to have to, we're going to do everything we can to make sure that the county wins. But I do think it's, again, one of those things that people should share with others. They should see what's going on. This is what both these cases remind me of is this is not only, not a problem. This is what we want. We want people like Coach Kennedy who have the attitude. Why is he going to pray after the football game? He says it goes way back to when he started. He promised to God that after every football game, he would go, they're all going to the center of the field and shaking the other coach's hand and all this. He's promised to God he would go to a knee and give thanks for the privilege of coaching those young men. That's what we want in a coach, and this is the guy we're persecuting. Judge Mack and the county, they're doing this great thing with these chaplains serving people. It's natural that they would be the ones to do the opening prayer, which we do, which, by the way, every federal court opens with a prayer. God save the United States in this honorable
court. And who
court.
better than a chaplain?
Yeah, so the idea that in a federal court, the judge has ruled, well, we've got to consider whether this is a violation, even though it should be dismissed, and I just opened my court with a prayer. I mean, it's just so bizarre to me, and we've had 2 Supreme Court cases on this, so we're going to have to fight this, unfortunately, and we've got to do everything we can to win because this is a tradition that goes back, to our very beginning of our history.
Kelly, in these cases, this Montgomery, this case with the Freedom from Religion Foundation, are the chaplains being paid?
No, they're volunteer.
This is another, it may seem like a minor point, but, when you say something is a violation of establishment of religion, they're just saying the very presence of someone's praying. Not that you're spending tax dollars to compensate. It's just a visceral rejection of the presence of prayer, the presence of faith in the public arena. It's just, the Freedom from Foundation, Freedom from Religion. Thank you very much. Freedom from Religion Foundation is just profoundly antagonistic to the idea of God, not just in their own lives, but they want to make they're the ones being coercive, saying no one else can be embracing their faith because we don't have faith. It's a very aggressive stance they're taking.
No doubt. And again, I just think it's so odd. Judge Mack is exactly the type of public servant we want, somebody that comes up with this approach. And what these chaplains, these ministers from the community are doing, that's exactly what we want. Those are the people now. Well, let's sue all the people who are doing good stuff, and let's see if we can discourage them, even though the law is very clear on this and has been for many, many years.
If they were successful, think about the kind of America that we would have. America would look so different than what it does now. Last week we were talking about victories in the way that, for instance, the administration and specifically the Department of Health and Human Services is now going to protect conscience and religious liberty under this administration. We're so happy about that because it's not just the right-wing conservative Americans. Average Americans want people of faith to be able to express that faith. That's what our country's about. And you have the left, which is really, I think these radical leftists aren't that great in number. But for some reason, under this last administration, they made so much progress. Fortunately, you, First Liberty, and other groups have fought using the Constitution. But now, even under this administration, you still have these battles, correct?
Yeah, we've got to be diligent, and we've got to win. And so I encourage people the same thing. I think, we put this. I put a little video on the Mac case, and I know there's some information on that.
This is at your website.
Yeah, and you can go to firstliberty.org or the Facebook page or whatever and get that. But these are the kind of things I think people need to know. I think sometimes if you don't listen to Point of View or you don't know about all these cases or what's going on, then you don't even realize there's a battle going on for the future of the country. You're kind of out it's like the Super Bowl's on and you don't even know it's happening, right? And so you don't even know to tune in and to get involved. And I encourage people, there is a battle. These attacks, one we're talking about is on its way to the Supreme Court. The other one is something that happens pretty much in every community of the country that is being challenged. That's, opening up with prayer. And I didn't even bring up the two cases we have going to the Supreme Court right now, both on whether county commissioners can open their county commission meeting with prayer. This is an issue that's going around the country. Or the Cambridge Christian School case we have where two Christian schools were told they could not have a prayer before their football game at the state championship. So this prayer issue is really an issue that's vibrant right now, and we've got to be diligent. And I encourage you, let other people know that these things are happening. Make sure everybody's in prayer and support and really backs, whether it's the kids at Cambridge or whether it's the chaplains who are opening up in prayer and serving people in the Judge Mack case, or whether it's Coach Kennedy.
I was just going to add, it's amazing you think about the organization, the Freedom from Religion Foundation, what they're really trying to protect, or if you distill down what their motive is, they want to protect people from ever possibly hearing anything about God, because they've rejected God. Nobody else can hear anything about him, which is a very tyrannical viewpoint, very like a totalitarian style of thinking, because we don't embrace God. Nobody can even hear about him.
Yeah, so much for freedom of thought and the marketplace of ideas, which is what this country is really about.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to Point of View. This is our weekend edition. I might encourage you during the break to go to our website, pointofview.net. You can find out, first of all, a link to the website for First Liberty. You can find out about all the cases we regularly discuss, including this development in the Coach Kennedy case, and read the article from the Seattle Times. And there's a donate button there. Here at the beginning of the year, we want to ask for you to get into the habit of supporting Point of View. It's very easy. Go to pointofview.net, and we'll be right back.
With the way things are going right now, there's got to be a source of truth somewhere.
Eric lives in California, and he's listened to Point of View since he was a child hanging around his dad's auto shop in Nevada. He says it's his only trustworthy source of information about what's happening in the world.
Well, I feel bad because I have not been donating, and I'll tell you what, I'm getting back to that because just recently I realized with all the junk going on, with all the media, with all these news things, the only one that I count on is you guys. And what would I do if you guys weren't there? I don't know what I'd do. Where would I get my news? And I would be dead in water. So I got to do my part.
Make sure you do your part, like Eric. Join the Truth Team. Get all the details by calling 1-800-347-5151 or visit online, pointofview.net/team. Support the truth and make a difference for the future. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team. 800-347-5151 and pointofview.net/team. Point of View will continue after this.
You're listening to Point of View.
The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Penna Dexter.
And Debbie Georgatos and Kelly Shackelford in studio with me. It's your weekend edition. And in the Washington Post today, there was an editorial. And I might mention that I think the Washington Post itself is its political stories are basically editorials from the left. But they usually have columnists who write their opinion pieces. But this was an actual editorial from the paper. And I thought it was interesting and a bit disturbing. They said that Republicans have embarked on a smear campaign of the FBI that can end only in a dangerous erosion of trust in law enforcement, the subjugation of law enforcement to partisan interests, or both. And they criticized several politicians, members of Congress, including House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes and Senate Homeland Security Chairman Ron Johnson, because they have been digging into the corruption in the FBI. So they're saying, how dare you do this? Well, you spent a lot of time, Debbie, yesterday on these issues of the FBI. So could you, to turn it around and say Republicans are irresponsible, I think is ridiculous. Wouldn't we at least want to know the truth?
Yes, I actually want to start with something that happened at the very end of yesterday's segment, which was the last caller after we'd had these two guests on talking about what's happening at the FBI. This last caller said, we have to be really careful. We have to show respect for this is the Department of Justice, our FBI. This should be nonpartisan. We respect our law enforcement. We can't go making these accusations. And it was really near the end of the show, and I thought on the way home I should have given the analogy. I did answer, but with the analogy, if you discovered the local police department was engaged in selling drugs, or whatever the crime would be, you wouldn't say, we respect the police so we won't investigate. You have to know what's true, and you have to enforce the law as to everyone. With respect, you hand me that Washington Post thing? I want to just take that language for a second. What the Washington Post folks are saying that the Republicans are doing, their language is embarking on a smear campaign of the FBI and ending in a dangerous erosion of trust. I want to tell you, if you weren't able to listen yesterday, the two guests we had on, one was John Guandolo, a former FBI agent whose job inside, among other things, was to create applications for FISA warrants, which is the FISA warrant is what is that issue in this case that got the whole Russian collusion investigation started. So this FISA warrant process is one which he described in depth, and I'll tell you in a very short manner. It is to comply with the requirements of the FISA law. There are detailed requirements, what has to be in the affidavit. It is thoroughly checked, background checked, researched at several steps along the way before it gets to the FISA judge. So this FISA warrant that got into all the spying got into the surveillance of Trump and the Russia people was done with numerous people involved at the very high levels of the FBI and Department of Justice, taking part in creating this FISA warrant. The FISA court has already released its opinion. The application for the FISA warrant has not been released, but the court's decision itself has been, in which it called attention to extreme irregularities and violations of the law because they were the Department of Justice was permitting outside agencies, third-party agencies, probably meaning Fusion GPS, access to secret data to create this dossier to start with. So the first problem that is emerging out of the FBI is it appears it was a completely fraudulent effort to get a FISA court warrant that resulted in the surveillance of the Russians and all of Trump's team. The second point is because of the text messages now being released, emails now being released, it has become evident that very high-level players at the FBI and Department of Justice were determined prior to the election that Trump was going to lose and Hillary Clinton was going to win. And they were using not just your tax dollars as federally compensated by your tax dollars, but using the machinery of the federal, the national security agencies for the political end to destroy one candidate in favor of another. And that's a crime. And so there's that whole within the FBI and Department of Justice effort to decide we know better, and the American people are not. We're going to destroy Donald Trump, and then after he won, they're still on that mission.
Yeah,
and so
I was going to say, the election happened, Donald Trump won to the surprise of many. But there were some there who weren't. They were going to hedge their bets, and they wanted an insurance policy. And so, there's this group trying to undermine this president. This is one of the ways that it's been happening, and they at the FBI are being exposed. And
exactly,
it's a well that we should be looking at this.
Yeah, this notion, what the Washington Post people are writing about precisely describes what the FBI was doing. They are describing the FBI. They talk about who created a dangerous erosion of trust. It is the people conducting a surveillance based on nothing, based on an opposition research paper paid for by Hillary Clinton. That's what the dossier was. The other guest we had on, though, yesterday was Sidney Powell, and she's an author, but she's also a former federal prosecutor, youngest one ever appointed as U.S. attorney. She has 20 years experience after that in federal appeals, and she's described a situation as just that, and she went through numerous elements of the violation of inside the FBI procedures, that you just don't ever do these things. And the other things that are going to come out about this shortly, there are text messages back and forth between two of the very highly placed players who happen to be involved in an illicit extramarital relationship. Leaving that aside, they were both acknowledging that you can read from the various texts which have now come to light that they were working very hard to undermine the Donald Trump campaign and to help Hillary Clinton. This is, the words used by John Guandola yesterday, this is treasonous if this is really what was occurring. Two last things, and I know I'm doing a lot in this segment and we all want to jump in, but there is an office created by Washington, Inspector General, and they exist in every agency, and it is an independent person whose job it is to keep an eye on everything happening there. The Inspector General for the Department of Justice, Michael Horowitz, is in the middle of writing his report. It's like a parallel investigation along with what Congress is doing, and Michael Horowitz has already given, according to a highly placed person, 1 million documents to Devin Nunes and the people in the House. And wow. I all this to say, this would make Watergate look like jaywalking. If what appears to have occurred did occur, you can't leave it alone. You can't ignore it. You can't say, oh, it's just partisan. It is an undermining of the integrity of the FBI and the Department of Justice for the personal political gain of one party.
Kelly?
This is really, really disturbing. One of the things I'm so disappointed with is all of journalism. I mean, the idea that any self-respecting newspaper like the Washington Post would call it a smear campaign. There's so much evidence here that not even concluding maybe it'll turn out that there's explanation for all the pieces of evidence. I doubt that very seriously.
You need to look at it.
But yeah, any self-respecting journalist would say this has to be looked into. At the very least. So, this is just embarrassing for the Washington Post. It just shows that they're I'm sorry, everybody gets tired of Trump with fake news. They're not a real newspaper anymore. This is not journalism. This is embarrassing. Any journalist wants to investigate and find out. And look, we know that we have a candidate for office who is running for office, and while he was running for office for the President of the United States, position, the other party, with the other party's president in power, was underneath him. They were surveilling the other candidate with our, all the power of government, right? And evidently there was a FISA warrant that was issued. And, I just want people to understand with it. Is this what you want? Do you want, the next time the Democrat runs, is Trump now allowed to have the FBI and all the intelligence agencies, taping what his opponent says during the campaign? This is like some other country. We don't do this in this country. And then the fact that you not only have what happened, but you've got statements of intent from people at the top of the FBI stating that while they're doing an investigation of Hillary Clinton, that they're actually not going to do their normal investigation because she might be president, and they want to make sure, that everything's good there. And then having statements about how they don't like the other opponent, and they're going to have an insurance policy in case he were to win, and then that they're having a secret meeting with others in the FBI. I mean, there's so much here, and this is so beyond Watergate. If any of this comes out to be what it sure looks like it is, I mean, there's got to be a cleaning of the house for the sake of the country. No one, everybody, liberal, conservative, should be in outrage about this and say this has got to be cleaned up. Our intelligence agencies cannot be used to attack American citizens in this kind of illegal way.
I'm going to open up the phones, 800-351-1212. Everything we put on the table today, of course, is subject for your calls, and we will be taking them after the break. Thank you, Debbie, for summarizing, and Kelly, because this is something we could discuss this and only this the whole 2 hours. And so thanks for being so succinct, and we do want to hear your thoughts on it. We'll be right back. The feminist left may not admit it, but the Me Too movement is a sign that the sexual revolution has failed women. Accounts of real sexual assault and harassment are pouring in, resulting in heavy costs to the perpetrators. But there's also a simmering discontent among women with the sexual culture as a whole. A recent account of a date gone bad resulted in the very public humiliation of comedian Aziz Ansari. An anonymous woman called Grace accuses him of violating her, and yet she admits to being at first a participant. When she firmly protested and wanted to leave, Mr. Ansari called a car. What Grace experienced was an awful date, not sexual assault. Women may not like the state of romance that prevails in our culture, but it's really what the feminists asked for. Feminists succeeded in arranging things so women could treat sex the way many men do. The broader culture doesn't see no-string sex as wrong anymore. But in practice, most women don't separate sex from relationship as easily as men do. Two popular female columnists, both, I'm guessing, in their 60s, write about this. Mona Charon writes at townhall.com, "Sadly, our culture has so exalted sexual license that the only form of sexual conduct women are permitted to protest is coercion. Women of strong faith can avoid this trap, and common sense tells us that if a woman doesn't want a date to be about sex, she can and should communicate that by her actions. She should set her boundaries ahead of time. She has every right to refuse a man's advances." Wall Street Journal columnist Peggy Noonan wrote in a column entitled "America Needs More Gentlemen" that we have lost track of what it means to be a gentleman, and we should rescue that old and helpful way of being. She continues, "The whole culture, especially women, needs the gentleman back. Yes, and we need ladies to act like ladies." For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. President Donald Trump is in Davos, Switzerland, at the Economic Forum, and he gave a speech there. Let's just hear a little clip from that.
From my first international G7 summit to the G20, to the UN General Assembly, to APEC, to the World Trade Organization, and today at the World Economic Forum, my administration has not only been present, but has driven our message that we are all stronger when free, sovereign nations cooperate toward shared goals, and they cooperate toward shared dreams. Represented in this room are some of the remarkable citizens from all over the world. You are national leaders, business titans, industry giants, and many of the brightest minds in many fields. Each of you has the power to change hearts, transform lives, and shape your country's destinies. With this power comes an obligation, however, a duty of loyalty to the people, workers, and customers who have made you who you are. So together, let us resolve to use our power, our resources, and our voices, not just for ourselves, but for our people, to lift their burdens, to raise their hopes, and to empower their dreams, to protect their families, their communities, their histories, and their futures. That's what we're doing in America, and the results are totally unmistakable. It's why new businesses and investment are flooding in. It's why our unemployment rate is the lowest it's been in so many decades. It's why America's future has never been brighter. Today, I am inviting all of you to become part of this incredible future we are building together.
Right, under the background of all these attacks on the president and all this fighting about what went on during the campaign, the transition, and what's continuing, we have him continuing to do his job. And the other attacks have to do with his policies of America First, which have already been implemented, and the fact that, or the idea that he may be doing damage to our relationships with other countries. So I wanted to play this clip from the speech to show what is actually happening. And I thought that, you know, it was an appeal to these other nations. Well, look what is happening in our country because of these changes. Join us. Join us. And your country can also succeed in these ways.
Well, it's a smart look, but what they've done over there is smart. I mean, these are business leaders. Mm-hmm. Look, they're very liberal. They hate Trump, but they win anyway. And, you know, Trump went anyway, and it took advantage of it, and I think a very smart way. And, you know, I can't think of a president before. And even though I know the media certainly wasn't friendly to George Bush or anybody else, you know, when they're, you know, every, you know, Ronald Reagan, George Bush, they're always either stupid or evil, right? I mean, this is the media play on them. But I can't think of ever before the media wanting other countries to hate our president more than they've tried with Trump. So the media is doing everything they can to sort of throw images over there and say, you should really hate Trump. But it seems like when he gets to actually spend time with people, you know, he gets along pretty well. Look, he doesn't when he takes hard stances. I know, you know, with the UK, with Great Britain, I mean, we've kind of ruffled the feathers, but it's because he's a hard negotiator, and on certain things he's not budging that are actually good for the country, whether it's trade deals, whether it's, you know, how we're going to act towards terrorists. I mean, I just think a lot of the attacks on him foreign policy-wise are very unfair. And I think that's especially true because Obama, when he was president, he created a horrible image for us foreign policy-wise. We had no respect around the world. People just felt like they could do anything. Of course, everything was exploding everywhere. The Middle East was in, you know, horrible condition. So I think, you know, the media is really, it's another one of these I hate Trump deals instead of looking at, you know, what's really happening. I think our respect level has risen, in part because they don't know what we'll do, because Trump is a little unpredictable, because they know he's going to be after American interests first, instead of sort of what the politically correct kind of thing is. And I think that's all good for our country.
Yeah, it's good to keep them guessing on some of it, especially countries like North Korea. Debbie?
Yeah, I love your comments. I totally agree, Kelly. I was Googling on my phone quickly, trying to find out. I heard in the news this morning there was a brief clip of someone speaking at Davos. It wasn't President Trump, but someone essentially giving credit to the fact that the tax bill and the resulting, you know, changes in America's economy over the last year are something the world should praise and emulate. I don't know who it was who was speaking. I can't find it quickly enough, but I mean, you know, you can facts speak louder than words. And I think when people look at America and they see our economy is booming and jobs are coming back and confidence is up and unemployment is down, it's hard to say you're there at some World Economic Forum to condemn that. I mean, it's just people are like, yay, look what's happening. So, and the other thing I thought about Donald Trump's message about America First going over there, in part it was required that kind of tone to reset. You were alluding to in the previous 8 years how much of America's image in the world was damaged. It was kind of resetting to the world. We're back as America to say we're actually proud of who we are. We love our country. We love our people. We're a good nation. We're a noble nation. Doesn't mean we hate everybody else or discriminate or do anything evil, but we're okay standing up for our nation, just like every other nation does for theirs. That reset was needed because of the tone taken the previous 8 years.
Yeah, our policies are well thought out, and we're not going to apologize for them. Well, let me take a very quick call before the break, and we'll continue then. I promise to take your calls. We'll continue doing that in the second hour. But let's go to Jan in Georgia, listening on GNN. Hi, Jan.
Thank you. I wanted to comment on, I'm getting sick and tired of this talking about... Well, I forgot what. Listen to this present. Well, I'm tired of.
We threw another issue at you, didn't we? I think you want to talk about the FBI.
Yes. Why can't we do something about this? And what can we, as Americans, and everybody listening to your show, do to make sure that this justice is brought to this ex-president and this Hillary Clinton? What can we do?
Yeah, well, that's another issue.
I think this is in Congress's hands. Look, this is the point. The FBI is under the authority ultimately of Congress, right? I mean, that's why there's oversight, and that's where we have the Intelligence Committee and these things going on. So your representative, wherever you are, is involved in this. I mean, for instance, every Republican in the House saw the memo, the 4-page memo that the Democrats are saying, oh, do not release this. The American people can't handle this. It's like, well, if it's that bad, we need to know about it, So every representative, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, you need to speak to them, because really any good American, in my opinion, wants this thing cleaned up. This should not be happening. We've got to have our intelligence agencies, we have to be able to trust. And I think we can in a lot of ways. But at the top levels, what we've seen recently, there's a serious problem. And we just need to clean house with some people and set a new tone and set a requirement from the head down on the type of integrity we expect. Now, I think your average FBI agent and stuff, I mean, these are great Americans. They went there to do the right thing. But it has been corrupted at the top. And Americans can see that, and they make sure your congressman say, I'm supporting you if he's strong, or if she's weak or whatever. Say, look, this is important. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. This is something we can all do, is talk to our representatives.
You are listening to Point of View. This is the weekend edition, and boy, we have a lot to cover. We do want to continue to take your calls, and we will continue to discuss the issues that we brought up here at the beginning of the program. I want to send you to pointofview.net. There's a couple of articles that relate to this. One, that there were many emails between a couple of FBI agents, the ones having the affair, that we thought were lost and now have been found. There's an article about that. There's also the donate button. Take advantage of it, and we'll be right back.
Why should you become a partner with Point of View Radio? Because for decades, this team has made a significant difference in lives and communities across the nation. Because America is dying for lack of biblical wisdom about life and culture. You should give because your gift will make possible cutting-edge information on issues that matter, information you won't hear anywhere else. Why? Because your gift will change lives, because you'll influence our culture with biblical truth, and because you can make a difference for the future. Our nation needs a truth team very badly. Support Point of View Radio today at pointofview.net. Click on Join the Truth Team and choose your level of support. Pointofview.net. Or call 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151. Or mail that first donation to Point of View, Box 30, Dallas, Texas 75221. Box 30, Dallas 75221. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I've recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Penna Dexter.
Our call-in number is 800-351-1212. We are taking your calls here on the Weekend Edition. Kelly Shackelford and Debbie Georgatos are in studio with me. And Kelly and Debbie, you know, we've had this whole special prosecutor Mueller appointed to look into quote-unquote collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia, or the Trump transition team and Russia. And there's been, I mean, nothing public that's surfaced that they've found. And yet we are finding out all sorts of other things, some of which you have just described, Debbie. And so, and it was interesting this week, another development was that the news reported that Trump was willing to testify in this. And I'm like, ooh, a little scary, because not that, I think his heart is that he wants to show that, you know, he didn't do these things that he's being accused of and so much is being made of. But fortunately, I guess the attorneys or something, you know, gave him some common sense. He's not going to testify. They will find something. They're already trying to, quote unquote, find something, aren't they?
Yeah, I was going to, I'm glad for that introduction to get back to this topic just a bit, to say one other point I wanted to make is that I think it's very easy in these kinds of discussions to seem like it's just partisan and it's kind of nasty and it's vindictive, and now we're trying to get people, we're trying to get Trump. And I don't like any of that. I don't think the show is ever like that. I don't think my commentary is ever like that. But these are, step aside from whichever party's in power, these are serious issues about whether you have integrity and the following of the law within the Department of Justice and the FBI. But to your particular point, Penna, what happens in some of these cases, what is being now alleged by many serious commentators, former U.S. attorneys, former prosecutors, is that the entire claim that there was some evidence of the Trump and Russia collusion was simply a manufactured hoax. There never was any evidence to start with. It was an effort to manufacture that and then get a warrant and start surveilling. But what happens in these cases, we were talking about in the break, and I think Kelly's going to chime in a moment, is what can happen in a lot of these cases is that the underlying alleged crime, the collusion between Trump and Russia, it was a made-up charge to start with. That's my opinion, and I think it's the opinion of many people who are speaking out now. But once you have that investigation going, so you identify witnesses, you identify players involved, and then you question them. So what people end up getting prosecuted for was not being involved in any way in some alleged Trump collusion with Russia, but instead the way you answered a question in a deposition or under oath, whether you committed perjury, whether you were obstructing justice. And so they refer to those kind of charges as process charges. You're not really being charged with collusion or any involvement between Trump and Russia. You're being charged with your conduct in the course of the investigation. And if the entire investigation sprang from a hoax, and yet you might be, or President Trump might be, in trouble in the way he responds to questions with a process charge, that becomes extremely frustrating. And I think what we're going to turn to now is talking about the wisdom of President Trump agreeing to testify. Special Prosecutor Mueller has said he wants to question President Trump.
Yeah, I think most people don't understand this. They're like, well, golly, if you got nothing to hide, why don't you just, go and do that? And this is why lawyers are there, because lawyers understand that, let's take this situation with the FBI. I've heard, I haven't seen the statistics, but I think this is true from what I see, certainly on all the big stuff. that most people are never charged with the actual crime they're being investigated with. They're charged because of how they answer questions. They're charged for obstruction of justice. So I want you, if you're out in the audience, I mean, think about that. Think if you're being charged with some crime and you didn't do it, and then that you say, well, no, I'm going to sit down and talk to the federal prosecutors and answer questions under oath.
It would be your first instinct.
Yeah, I've got nothing to hide. And then they start asking about stuff from 3-4 years ago, and you're like, and again, everybody think what you remember about 3 or 4 years ago, okay? And you're like doing your best to answer what you can remember and all this. And then after that, you trying to be cooperative and helpful, the FBI comes back and said, well, you've got a lot of inaccurate answers that we know from what you said are not truthful because we have the real information. And so now we're going after you for obstruction of justice. And we could put you in prison for, 20 years or whatever. Now you're and look at what's happened in this Trump special prosecutor investigation. No one has been charged. No one, okay, with the actual substantive thing they were investigated for. They're going after them for, again, these kinds of process crimes and other things that are off basis. So that's what's happening here. So that's the danger to the president. I think the president is like your average person. He's like, I didn't do this. This is silly. It's a witch hunt. I'm happy to talk to the special prosecutor. But if you're his attorneys, you're like, no. They're going to start asking you a bunch of questions about stuff. And if you don't remember, misspeak on something now, they'll come after you for, obstruction of justice. And so that's the danger that he's in with this situation. But I think Trump is the average normal American saying, I've got nothing to hide. I didn't do anything wrong. I'm happy to answer the question.
That's why you need a lawyer.
Yeah,
Yes.
in fact, you think in all criminal, if you've ever sat on a jury, you've heard the instruction in a criminal case, the judge will tell you that no one who is accused has to take the stand in their own defense. They don't have to testify. And you're told as a juror, you can't make a judgment. You can't have that enter into your calculation of guilt or innocence because the person chose not to testify. Because most defendants, especially if you're innocent, you're told, you would think, well, sure, I want to tell the jury, whatever the story was. But this is what lawyers are always saying. No, you don't take the stand. You can get tripped up. You can get lost in your you get confused. And then you're stuck because what you're saying is under oath. And that is actually both Paul Manafort and the other Papadopoulos.
Yes.
I should know. It's a good Greek name like mine. Papadopoulos are both being charged with process crimes, obstruction, not anything to do with the actual original alleged collusion.
We're taking your calls at 800-351-1212. A lot of people have said, well, what can we do about this? And the solution is to pay attention to it and keep in communication with your members of Congress. They're the ones that can do something.
Say you support releasing the memo, because there's a 4-page memo created by the House Intelligence Committee by Representative Nunes and his team that recounts what was really happening inside the FBI, and it's been described by very responsible members of Congress. Jim Jordan, Mark Meadows is saying it's the most stunning memo they have ever read. Condemnation of what was actually occurring based on evidence that this committee has in front of it from the FBI, from emails and text messages, the level of corruption inside the FBI. And so the battle is about release the memo, and the Democrat counterpart has Adam Schiff has made a statement last week. I think it was to Fox or to some news outlet. Just said basically the American people can't handle it. You can't release the memo. He wants, in fact, he says unless all the underlying material is released, in which case, okay,
which is all classified, or much of it probably.
We cannot let this escape the attention of the American people. The release the memo movement, I think, is...
Now, there's a hashtag release the memo, that's out there. So, I mean, it's something that people can easily do. I think that's very important. I mean, this is, Watergate was a big controversy. Watergate was about a cover-up of a second-rate burglary. This is about weaponizing one party, possibly, or some people within that party, weaponizing the intelligence power of our government against the other party or other candidate. That's something we got to make sure never happens again.
And we'll be right back.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
You've probably seen campaign yard signs popping up in your neighborhood. This is a vivid reminder that we're headed for another election season. The general election isn't until November, but party primary elections will be taking place in the next few months. What will be the agenda for the candidates for the political parties? Well, the Republican agenda should be fairly easy to predict. Incumbents will point to the recently passed tax reform bill and ask to be reelected to focus on unfinished business like health care reform and welfare reform. Other Republican candidates may argue that they should be put in office instead of career politicians so that we can drain the swamp. The agenda for Democrats isn't so easy to predict. They will point to wins in Virginia and Alabama. They'll say that Donald Trump is unpopular, but they really don't have an agenda that could make people want to vote for their candidates. Some have suggested that the current debate about DACA and Dreamers will be a possible item on the Democratic agenda. Matthew Continenti, in a recent column, explains why that won't be an effective strategy. A Pew poll that surveyed public priorities ranked immigration 15th. The top three items were terrorism, the economy, and education. It's also worth mentioning that the debate about the status of Dreamers will be resolved one way or another long before the November elections. Running against the president and the Republican leadership in Congress isn't a very compelling reason for potential voters to turn out in an off-year election. Matthew Continenti says that the Democratic policy cupboard is empty. There are no alternative Democratic health care bills, no alternative Democratic tax bill. This isn't the first time both Republican and Democratic candidates have tried to run an agenda of obstruction. I think voters are looking for more. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
I am going to add one more topic to the list, and Kelly Shackelford, Debbie Georgatos are with me. And the news just keeps coming in. It's trickling in every day about sort of the results, reactions to the tax cut that passed Congress and President Bush signed. And, you know, one of the President Trump signed. Oh, my goodness. And so, you know, you have more companies responding. And for instance, Starbucks gave raises and stock grants to their employee workforce, which is 150,000. And I think we posted an article on that at pointofview.net. Then Disney, $100,000 bonuses to 125,000 eligible employees, plus a fund to help hourly employees with tuition costs. J.P. Morgan Chase, $20 billion over 5 years to raise hourly pay for works and open branches in new U.S. locations. So, you know, instead of bowing to the government's minimum wage demands or, you know, the left's minimum wage demands, this company's doing it on its own, the free market again. Verizon, about 155,000 employees will receive 50 shares of restricted stocks. And these are just a few. And, you know, when you find companies that are from the left, like Apple, who's bringing in money that's been parked overseas to now be taxed at the lower rate under this. And there have been articles published in the last couple of weeks about the things that money will accomplish just here in the United States. So the stories just keep continuing. I didn't want to move on before sort of
well, it's amazing the list of companies now. When you see people who have put these together, I mean, it's just a huge number of large companies that have said, we're giving all of our people $1,000 bonus. Some, I think yesterday was $2,000 to a number. I forget which major company that was. There was Morgan. Was it Morgan Stanley or anyway? So it's just amazing. And I could not believe this, but Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who used to head the Democratic Party, they showed. I saw a video of her last night at a gathering where she responded to that by saying, "Well, that $1,000, really wasn't much money. That's just kind of pathetic." And I'm like, really? I mean, this is what you're saying to most Americans? $1,000? She said, after all, you that's before taxes. I'm like, okay, I think most Americans would say I could use the $1,000 less taxes, to buy, what is it? So you were saying, buy my kids clothes for the entire school year.
Fix my car,
or maybe, both of our cars during the, I mean, $1,000 is a lot of money to most Americans. I mean, it's a significant percentage of, what they earn in the year. And so, that kind of, attitude, response, or whatever, I don't think that's going to win very many Americans over. I think Americans appreciate the fact that money is being returned to their pocket. And I think you're right. I think this is just the beginning. I think, taking this money from that is, outside of the United States and now making it okay for that money to come back for being invested in our people, in the future of our companies. I mean, I think we're going to see, 2-3 years of, results of that. I don't even think we've begun to see a lot of the things that are going to happen. And it's already incredible what we've seen, but I think we're going to see a lot more, and it's going to continue.
So here's the numbers for Apple. Apple announced it plans to repatriate $245 billion in cash it had parked overseas. It's now going to pay a lower tax rate. This is part of the bill, 15.5%, which means that Apple will remit $38 billion to the national treasury.
Yeah, money which they would not have had. Money which they wouldn't have gotten.
Right.
So we're going to more tax money is coming into our government because of the lowering of taxes.
Yeah, I'd love to see, too, I love everything you're both saying. I'd love to see more, too, acknowledgement about the idea the taxes are a freedom issue. They are a family comfort issue. They're not just, when you hear taxes discussed politically, they're mostly kind of ascribed to, well, rich corporations want tax cuts or taxes or, there's always couched in language, which is, tax cuts for the rich. But the truth is, when you put more money back in the pockets of businesses, small businesses, big businesses, and individuals, it's a freedom issue. It means you're comfortable spending the money to fix your car because you know based on your income and what the taxes are going to be that you're going to be okay paying your mortgage or your rent and your food. These are just taxes are freedom issues, and this kind of the left has loved to mock trickle-down economics, and I guess was that Reagan's term? I don't know who made up that term, but, it got mocked. But it's exactly what we're seeing. When you put money, all it means is money back in the pockets of people. They do things like Apple is doing, and the number of jobs, I'm sorry, did you say they're building new businesses and creating new jobs for people?
And they're increasing the income of the people they already have, which was something the left said companies would not do. They said they would keep it.
They thought they'd buy their own stock or things like that. And even if they do, okay, that's good. But they're not just doing that. I mean, they're going to invest. Look, people do a lot better job of investing in their own future than the government does by having their money. So when you give money back and people and companies get to actually look at where they're going to invest the money, that's where the most smart investment of the money is going to occur. And that's what freedom is all about.
It is. And then you think the cyclical effect. If Apple creates new jobs, so in your town you have maybe only 100 new jobs. So people who were collecting unemployment or food stamps or whatever are working. So they're getting a salary. They're paying more taxes, and they have that, personal sense of joy, self-sufficiency, that feeling that comes from taking care of yourself and being able to be self-reliant. This is it's more money in the treasury for the taxes paid, and people feel better when they feel like they're self-reliant. It has an uplifting effect throughout America in small communities and big ones.
Again, we've got our own personal example of this, which is, we missed Kirby this week because he was in Hungary doing some great teaching over there. But I said to him before he's leaving, I said, we were there a number of years ago. We were asked to come for religious freedom, and man, the condition was it was hard. It was, staying in the hotels, all of it was really not so good. It was dark, and there was just no good place to stay, no good place, all this. And Kirby's like, well, it's not like that anymore. And I was like, well, what happened? And it was like, well, they lowered their corporate tax rate. And all these companies came in, and now the whole place has begun to improve. And I thought, what an interesting example, that Hungary had a better tax rate than we did. So, if you're a corporation, you'd rather be in Hungary than the United States until, now we've begun to move that back. But that's the way it works. If you look around the country, I bet you won't find very many rundown countries that have a low corporate tax rate. I bet you, Ireland is the famous one, right? There's the total turnaround there because they really lowered their corporate tax rate. But we're now beginning to see what we've been saying for years and has been, with no success, and now we're seeing the results already. We're seeing huge results. And again, I love that these companies, these aren't conservative companies. This is Apple, Starbucks, right? All these different, this is just about business. And this is the way it works. When you lower the taxes, when you make it okay for them to bring all this money, trillions of dollars we're now talking about that is coming back from offshore accounts into the United States, and that money will now be used. I think everybody knows that's going to lead to, lower unemployment, more jobs, more activity, more investment. And that's why I think the recent, I couldn't believe this, but I don't know if everybody saw this. We are now at the lowest unemployment rate for African Americans in the history of the country. The lowest ever. And that's because of this type of economic activity that's going on and the freedom that's being unleashed with all these companies and with people's taxes going down. I just think it's changed the whole attitude across the country.
And we're just at the beginning of it. We haven't even had time for this to really seep across the economy.
Yeah, it's interesting for people who aren't really economically oriented, and I really wasn't either for a long time in my life. But if you think as an individual, if you had a job and you were told your salary is, let's just say for round numbers, $50,000 a year, but the government's going to take $48,000 of that, or some number, $20,000 of that, you would make different calculations about your life, your plans, your future, your mortgage, your rent, what you can buy. And the same thing applies whether you're a multi-billion-dollar company or an individual earning $50,000 a year. When it's more in your pocket, you're comfortable doing things. You're comfortable spending your money. You're comfortable planning. You're comfortable being, feeling secure. And that's how these companies feel. They're not afraid they're going to get clobbered by a big tax bill and need to hold on to their cash to be able to pay it.
So they're going to reward their employees also. And as unemployment drops, as it's doing, companies are going to do more to keep the employees they have. And so that's going to make individuals' lives better. So these things do affect not only at the corporate level, they move all the way throughout.
They ripple.
Yeah, they ripple. And, this tax cut actually targeted some different benefits. But I think the benefits that get to the average person are going to come more from the full economy improving. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I promise we will take your calls in the next segment. Stay with us for more Point of View.
Point of View is committed to spreading the truth, oftentimes a truth that those in political power don't like getting heard. But the only way it can be heard is if our team stands strong together, if you do what you can to support the Point of View Truth Team. It's having an impact, as we heard recently from U.S. Representative Louis Gohmert.
Everywhere I go, I hear people that you have influenced, that Point of View has affected. You have made such a difference, and you rely on people to contribute. And if they don't contribute, then that truth does not get heard.
Help Point of View make a difference. Pray and consider what level is right for you. $30, $65, $100 a month, or even more. Please do what you can. 1-800-347-5151. Or visit online, pointofview.net. Look near the top right for the link that says Become a Monthly Partner. Join the Truth Team, 800-347-5151, and pointofview.net. Point of View will continue after this.
are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Penna Dexter.
We are taking your calls, 800-351-1212. And let me go right to the phones and speak with Michael, listening from Missouri on KNEO. Hi, Michael.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for waiting.
Thank you for providing this wonderful service that you do. It's a blessing to everyone who listens, I'm sure. My question or comment has to do with the Freedom of Religion Foundation. The people who belong to this group are very strongly in belief of what they're doing. Is that correct?
Yes, they state that they're an atheist group, and yes, they're very committed to their mission, and which shows that they're only like a $3 million organization, but look at what havoc they cause across the country.
My question, if they are filing suit complaining about another religious system, how could any judge not be put into a quandary as to say, which religious belief system are we going to support or denigrate?
Well, what they typically do is they take the First Amendment, the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. You know, the First Amendment says the first two clauses of the First Amendment are the religion clauses. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So it's all about the free exercise of religion. They take the Establishment Clause, which you and I know was meant to say, we don't want there to be a national church that then tells all of us that we can't be in a different church. That's what establishment and an establishment means. What they do is they interpret that to mean that you can't have religion anywhere around the government or anywhere in public because then other people have this right to not hear about religion. And, of course, there's no freedom from religion if there's freedom of religion, just like there's no freedom from speech if there's freedom of speech. And so this is what they're after. They're not saying one religion over another. They're saying they just don't want any religion, which is not what our country says.
Their religion over ours.
Well, but they wouldn't say theirs is a religion. They as much as atheism, you know, they wouldn't say it is.
They would say freedom from religion, all religion.
Yeah, which is not our Constitution, right? I mean, you can't be free from other people's religion if you have freedom of religion, because we're going to interact in public. And, you know, I might say, hey, here's what I believe. And you go, oh, my gosh, I don't believe that. Police, get this man. I mean, that's not a free society. And so for them to have their name be freedom from religion shows right off that they're anti-freedom, because can you imagine if your name were the Freedom from Speech organization? Well, that means there's no freedom of speech. The whole point in a free society is you have to tolerate the fact that other people express things that are different from what you believe. That's what a free society looks like. Now, as Christians, we believe, just give me a free society because the truth will win out. And, you know, I'll let the Holy Spirit do the convictions. Yeah. But if you have the government beginning to put its clamps down and say, no, you can't talk about that, or you can't say that, that's what we don't want. We want freedom so that you can share the gospel, so that you can share the truth, and so that, you know, you can let sunlight's the best disinfectant. You can get all the lies and the darkness spread away because you can speak the light.
It sounded like you might have been implying, Michael, I liked your question. I appreciate it. I hear some people say, well, atheism, that's just another set of beliefs about God. It's a set of beliefs that God does not exist. And so they're really trying to say, we've decided God doesn't exist, so nobody else can say he can. I mean, it's, if you want to describe it as a religion, it's a religion that says there is no, or it's a set of beliefs about God, which is God doesn't exist. But I love, and I want to reiterate what Kelly is saying, that, you know, this whole notion of the First Amendment right to practice and have freedom of religion is foundational to America. And what's happened is the courts, in some cases, and the American left have stretched the first part of the First Amendment, the Establishment Clause, or is that the second part? Establishing. First part. Okay. I just said it to myself. To mean it cannot exist in the public square, and that is not what the Establishment Clause was intended to do.
Not at all. And I will say this to be encouraged, Michael. at First Liberty, we have a whole project just on dealing with the Freedom from Religion Foundation. So when they send these silly threatening letters and make these threatening statements, that we're there to offer free legal assistance to the county or the school district or the government that's getting this pressure to do the wrong thing. And we've won every case we've had with them. The most recent one was the Bible curriculum case out of West Virginia. So we can win these cases, and we can stop this if people are willing to stand up and do the right thing. And First Liberty, we've got people who are giving specifically to stop these types of attempts to really change our country to something it never was, and it's working. We just need everybody sort of playing their part, because we can't do it if we don't have people that are willing to stand up, and then people, when they do stand up, that are willing to stand with them and make sure that their freedoms are protected.
Well, speaking of people who are willing to stand up, we started out the show talking about Coach Kennedy in Washington, who prayed after football games, and he's not allowed to do that if anyone can see him, according to the Ninth Circuit. So this case is going to the Supreme Court, and Kelly, we just got notice that it's actually going to be represented by your attorney, Mike Berry, who comes in here a lot of times on Fridays and helps us out. With Coach Kennedy on Tucker Carlson's show tonight.
Yeah, it's going to be, I think I saw 7:40 Eastern, or 7:40 Central, I guess, 8:40 Eastern. But so Coach Kennedy and Mike Berry, our Deputy General Counsel, are both going to be on tonight with Tucker talking about this. This is what I was talking about. Everybody in the country needs to know about this case. I mean, it's important because I think most people, when they learn, what did he do? Oh, he must have done. What did he do? Grab the kids and sort of, say, you come pray with me or you're in big trouble? No. He went by himself for 15 seconds, went to a knee and said a silent prayer. That's what he was fired for. That's what the Ninth Circuit said is unconstitutional. They said no coach can pray in public if anyone can ever see them. I mean, and the implications of this are chilling. I mean, a teacher wouldn't be able to wear a cross to school. They couldn't bow their head over their meal. Jewish teachers couldn't wear a yarmulke. I mean, we could just go on and on. I don't care what your federal government or state government or local government job is. If you ever do anything religious that anybody can see, now you're illegal. That's not the law. It's never been the law, but the Ninth Circuit wants to make it the law. So this is something that's really important that we get reversed.
Debbie.
I was nodding along.
Okay.
We were actually on the break talking about Tucker Carlson, too. He's just does a great job of laying out stories in a fun way. And this is a fabulous bit of national attention on such an important case.
On Fox News. Okay, let's go to California. John listening in on KYCC. Hi, John. Thanks for calling.
Hi. Sometimes I don't hear the discussion part of the exercise of religion in the context of what our forefathers established. We do not allow all religions the free exercise of their religion. That we allow them their free exercise of religion within the context of the Judeo-Christian ethic, because we don't allow Mormons to practice polygamy, which they believe was a key ingredient in order to go to heaven. And we actually ban them from practicing polygamy. We don't allow Muslims to practice Sharia law. So the exercise to practice your religion has limits within the Judeo-Christian ethic that founded our nation. And I don't oftentimes hear that as part of the discussion, because if you just took the phrase, the free exercise of your religion, that has limits. And our country has always
But every limit has to be litigated on its own.
Yeah, and there
is a limit.
Every fundamental constitutional right, free speech, for instance, has limits too, right? Free exercise of religion. You're right. I mean, free exercise of religion does have limits, or else people could sacrifice their children, right? I mean, we had that happening in the Old Testament. So no, you're right. It's just we don't generally have to talk about those cases as much anymore. But it's true that the free exercise of religion is not absolute, just like freedom of speech isn't absolute. I can't defame you and then say, wait, I'm protected by the Constitution, although I lied specifically about you in a way that caused you damage, financial damage. I can't yell fire in a crowded theater and have everybody hurt and then say you can't come after me criminally for, the riot I caused or whatever. So there are limits, and that's true.
Yeah, I think part of it would be that we share with our misguided atheist friends, listen, you're misrepresenting the whole context of the First Amendment. Everything that we do as a country and as a nation was founded on the Judeo-Christian ethic. So the fact that you're just arguing against us, you're arguing based around the freedom that the Judeo-Christian ethic gave you, the freedom of speech. So this standard comes from the Judeo-Christian ethic. It doesn't come from there is no God. So they're arguing really against themselves, and I just think that's an important aspect.
How far we've come since we had more of a Christian consensus in this country. We'll continue to take your calls after the break. We'll be right back. The feminist left may not admit it, but the Me Too movement is a sign that the sexual revolution has failed women. Accounts of real sexual assault and harassment are pouring in, resulting in heavy costs to the perpetrators. But there's also a simmering discontent among women with the sexual culture as a whole. A recent account of a date gone bad resulted in the very public humiliation of comedian Aziz Ansari. An anonymous woman called Grace accuses him of violating her, and yet she admits to being at first a participant. When she firmly protested and wanted to leave, Mr. Ansari called a car. What Grace experienced was an awful date, not sexual assault. Women may not like the state of romance that prevails in our culture, but it's really what the feminists asked for. Feminists succeeded in arranging things so women could treat sex the way many men do. The broader culture doesn't see no-string sex as wrong anymore. But in practice, most women don't separate sex from relationship as easily as men do. Two popular female columnists, both, I'm guessing, in their 60s, write about this. Mona Charon writes at townhall.com, sadly, our culture has so exalted sexual license that the only form of sexual conduct women are permitted to protest is coercion. Women of strong faith can avoid this trap, and common sense tells us that if a woman doesn't want a date to be about sex, she can and should communicate that by her actions. She should set her boundaries ahead of time. She has every right to refuse a man's advances. Wall Street Journal columnist Peggy Noonan wrote in a column entitled America Needs More Gentlemen that we have lost track of what it means to be a gentleman, and we should rescue that old and helpful way of being. She continues, the whole culture, especially women, needs the gentleman back. Yes, and we need ladies to act like ladies. For Point of View, I'm Penna Dexter.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Well, before we end the program, and thank you for your participation, and we'll try to get another call or two in during this segment, but we got a couple sort of surprising stories. One of them, Kelly brought to my attention. This is scientists at the University of Manchester, and they've been studying climate, and they found a surprising global warming culprit: sandwiches. In the first study of its kind, the researchers carried out an in-depth audit of various sandwiches throughout their life cycles and found that they could be responsible for the equivalent annual carbon emissions of 8.6 million cars in Britain alone. And they talk about all kinds of things about the growing of sandwiches, the transportation of sandwiches, the packaging of sandwiches that makes them a culprit for global warming, and perhaps we ought to cut them out.
I think the hot air from that story is greater than any global warming from sandwiches. And I think the Earl of Sandwich would be highly upset by this false report.
I think he would. Well, I would be starving right now because I had a sandwich for dinner last night. But also another story, this comes out of a study that Harvard University did on U.S. Christianity. And we're always hearing the warnings that Christianity is dying in America. And yet the study at Harvard found that the percentage of church-attending Americans relative to the overall population is more than 4 times greater today than it was in 1776. So actually we're getting more Christianity in the country. And, to what do we attribute this?
I love this because, first of all, I wonder if it just kind of killed these Harvard researchers to have to report this. But, okay, that was a little bit of the liberal Harvard world. But this was a great, because the article did have basic data, as Penna just mentioned, this idea that the percentage of Americans today, church-attending Americans relative to the overall population, 4 times greater than the founding of our country in 1776. That is so inconsistent with it's surprising given that we keep hearing that there is just decline in church attendance. But the other thing they talked about in here, in this article, many things, but they talked about also the brunt of the losses because they have had, one more positive, the number of attendees has continued to rise each and every decade over our nation's history right up until the present. But they talked about the brunt of losses, though, people leaving churches, is that they're leaving liberal churches. And by that, they're using the term liberal to mean, not locked on with clarity to traditional Christian doctrine. And there is so much in liberal churches where I'm aware of friends who attend churches, which is, if you go to church, that's a wonderful thing. But there are churches where it seems to be kind of a social thing. They are very ardent about, let's not take a strong position. We don't want to condemn, same-sex marriage because, after all, whatever reason they have, and we don't want to say anything about abortion because unwanted pregnancies are tough, and we want to love our neighbors as ourselves. So we love the LGBTQ community, and we support their efforts. And we're one of the churches that is in the social justice and environmental justice movement. All of those things have accepted into theology the weaving in of human popularly doctrines. What's popular in the modern world, popular modern thought, is somehow woven into what churches teach. And I think this point this article is making is that traditional churches that hold to theological truth, biblically based truth, are the ones that are growing. And, I mentioned a minute ago that I can completely believe that because really, if you're searching, you want to feel you're searching for truth, not just human comforts. You can go into the local Starbucks and find people who agree with your view on all sorts of social issues. You're yearning for the scriptural truth, who Jesus is and was, what the nature of God is, who you are as God's child. You want to hear truth. And I think that, when you're really searching and you're perhaps at a low and struggling point in your life, you want truth, not liberal gobbledygook, because that was one of the points this article was making.
This Harvard study kind of comports with the fact that the Pew studies that say that mainline churches are in free fall. And the most significant growth is the more non-denominational, doctrinally based churches. So that's interesting. Mm-hmm. And, the questioning of, for instance, the historicity of Jesus, sin, and a lot of the biblical, the 10 Commandments, a lot of that is, nobody wants to be part of that anymore. And here's an interesting fact that the study found, that evangelical churches gain 5 new congregants exiled from the liberal churches for every one they lose for any reason. So it is an exodus from liberal churches, part of it, to the more conservative evangelical church.
Yeah, I think, look, we live in a society where it used to be that these things were taught, a lot of these biblical principles and teachings were taught in our schooling.
Right.
And I think people now have really had a lack of that. They're malnourished biblically. And I think there's therefore a hunger for people to get information. I mean, there's so many Americans probably listening to this show all over the country that are like, boy, there's a lot of stuff I'd like to know. There's a lot of stuff I would like to really connect with God. I'd like to understand what his purpose is for me and why he made me the way he made me and what he has for me and my family. And I think people have a desire for that. And I think it's especially so because My wife and I were talking about this over the last year. You know, when we grew up, I didn't know anybody that was having panic attacks. I hear about another person almost every day having panic attacks. A lot of times a teenager. You know, it's just society and technology, I think, is so overwhelming to our systems. I think we're so overburdened that I think people have a hard time handling I don't think we're meant for what's being thrown on people right now. And I think especially the youngsters are really suffering from this. And I think as a result, people are looking something more than the material, than technology, than, you know, their gaming or being attached to their phone or their computer. They want to know the maker of life and understand why they're here. And they need relationships with people who will love them and say, hey, they're not here this week. I wonder if we need to reach out to them. I think people need that more than ever right now. And so I think that's part of why this is occurring, because there's never been a greater need for you to invite your neighbor to church, because people need that more now than we ever have, I think, before in this country.
You know, this study found something else that was very interesting to me, because we also talk about millennials, and we concentrate a lot on millennials here at Point of View. We have millennials now that are hosts of our show. We dedicate our Wednesday show to millennials. And millennials, according to Pew, says that studies of young adults who left their faith, because they're always saying they'll leave after they get out of the home. But only 11%, according to this study from Pew, said that they had a strong faith in childhood. Only 11% of those that left. 89% said they came from a home that had a very weak faith in belief and practice. So really, if you provide a strong home for your kids, the chances are that they're going to stay with their faith is much greater than, I think, what we hear.
Or return.
Or return. I mean, prodigal son thing. And
yes.
Yeah. And a lot of times they don't go to church. In fact, Christopher Smith, who's a sociologist, said, don't confuse them not going to church with them losing their faith. Because there is a period of life when Christians, they're single, they're in college, they're just out. They don't go as much, a lot of them. So don't confuse that with that they've lost their faith. Just encourage them back.
Yeah. There's a tiniest little point about this, about in our political culture, we've had so much discussion of the moral equivalency of all ideas, that you just kind of every idea, well, that one side thinks this, one side thinks this. And it seems like it's kind of woven its way into Christian thought in America where, well, this could be true. Maybe this is true. And people know, actually, no, there is such a thing as truth, and I want to find it. That is that yearning of the heart. They want to find truth. And that moral equivalency that seems to have been popular, it doesn't cut it in your search for your identity, for your as God's child.
Well, we have one caller we haven't gotten to, Tony in California, but she says, above all, we need to remember to pray. So let me just encourage that. Kelly?
Amen. Amen. It's been
Thanks
a great
for joining me.
Thank you.
And Debbie, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
I don't know what I would have done without you. It was a lot of fun. Ladies and gentlemen, have a great weekend. Steve and Andrew and Karen, thank you for your hard work. We'll see you next week.
Is religious freedom still a cornerstone of the republic, or has it effectively been crushed by the forces of tolerance? America needs Christians to be informed and as unified as possible, applying God's wisdom to civic life. Point of View can be a key part of a successful mission. I believe in America. I believe God wants His best for us. We can face whatever the world throws at us as long as we stand